This time, followed by brief remarks, and we do mean brief, to the 3 minutes that everyone's been instructed. In this order, Honorable Mel King, Dr. Fred Allen, Dr. Linda Daniels, Most Reverend Felipe Cupertino Teixeira, Mr. Michael Curry from the NAACP, that order. So, George, you can take all the time you want, but everybody else gets 2 to 3 minutes.
It was 2007, and we're taking a course. It was a political philosophy course on Hegel, George W. Hegel, a German philosopher. And the book we're dealing with was Elements of the Philosophy of Right. I'm a doctoral student at the School of Theology, but I was always in the philosophy department on the 5th floor, where I took most of my courses. And we were dealing with this book, Elements of the Philosophy of Right. And in that book, we came across a passage, a whole chapter, in which Hegel argues that the criminal will always be a criminal. And when I read that, he said the criminal will consistently be a criminal. He does not support restoration. He does not support rehabilitation. So then immediately I began to think, so what about other mitigating factors, like racism, like poverty, like, okay, personal responsibility, like social issues? How do you deal with that when you say the criminal is always a criminal? Immediately I began to do my own research. And it was the spring of 2007, and by the end of the summer of 2007, I had a manuscript of about 250 pages. And so I gave it to most of my professors. I said, this is a book, this is something I want to publish. And Dr. Peterson read it, and others read it, but some of our professors said, yes, George, it's just too dense. It's like a thesis or like a term paper, something like that. I mean, it doesn't relate. So I put it down and I said, okay, if this thing doesn't come to life, God will make a way. So I had an invitation briefly to go to the University of Toledo in Ohio in 2008. And I moved to Syracuse to do some work at Syracuse University. So the engagement was in March. And so I took the bus from Syracuse to go to Ohio, the University of Toledo, where I was speaking and also serving as a guest artist. Sitting on the bus, going over my notes, 2 Border Patrol officers came over to me. And they looked at me, they came directly to me and said, give us your ID. So I took out my Boston University ID, my driver's license, I took out everything, gave it to the guy, to the officers. And they looked at it, went back and came back and said, we're going to arrest you. You traveled to Canada and Mexico twice. Your visa has expired. So I said, oh no, I've never traveled to Canada and Mexico. And what to cut a long story short, they arrested me. They took me to the Border Patrol office. People began to call. And eventually, I told the guy, I said, look, I've never been to Canada and Mexico. I'm not illegal. I have a status. And so he said, well, it wasn't you. And then I turned to him and said, it wasn't me. And he said, yes, it wasn't you. But in less than 5 minutes, I was whisked out to the federal detention facility in Decatur, New York, where I spent 5 days. And the first night I began to wonder, I said, well, what's happening? And so, for some reason, I looked around me, and most of the people in there were about 75% were black men from Africa and the Caribbean. I clandestinely began to go to them, so how long you been here? How long you been here? How long, what's the story? What's the story? And it was so marvelous. I met this guy who began to weep. He had been there for more than 6 months. He had just traveled from Ghana to the US, and he didn't know anybody was arrested. And well, after 5 days, we paid the bond, and my church and people from other places helped to pay it and got me out. I released the book and published the book with my own story in the book, and so the book it's been published. But then just within that time, I had this thing to start at Center for Church and Prison. Because I believe that the criminal is still